What's going on, YouTube? Back at you with another video. This is Marvel versus Capcom. Holy shit, that was insanely retarded. To those who may not know, there was this hashtag or pound sign if you're actually a man of culture. Person of culture. Free MVC2 movement that's been going on for quite a while, considering that a lot of people really like Marvel vs. Capcom 2. People consider it one of the greatest fighting games of all time, having, at the time, the biggest roster, mainly consisting of Marvel and Capcom characters, duking it out in 3v3 combat with jazz music that may be unfitting, but is been grown to be liked, I guess, with an all-star cast of characters that were taken from other games, repurposed into the game that we all know and love today. Even as far back as the Dreamcast, and well, as somewhat of improvement as the PS2 and Xbox versions are, they are very much disliked for a reason. You're probably wondering what the fuck does this rambling have to do with anything? Well, I'll tell you actually, it's because for whatever gaming conference there has been, I honestly don't really keep up with it because I tend to stay in my own circle unless it's something that's legitimately interesting. Like if a new Blast of Master Zero game comes out that isn't fucking terrible and has better content. There was a lot of retro games being re-released on other systems. Or modern systems, actually. Things like Fighting Force, which is ironic because I mentioned it not that long ago and actually played the PC version. Gex, which people finally got their wish, so better having a remaster of an old good game than a new shitty game, am I right? The greatest games of all time, the Bubsy Collection, and the fact that people still want to berate that game for reasons unknown. At least it's not Superman 64, but I think one has proper licensing compared to the other one, but let's just continue. The biggest announcement is that Capcom is finally unveiling what people have wanted for so long, and an even better version that was previously done with Arcade 1-Up. The Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Game Collection that's being released on PlayStation 4, Steam, and Nintendo Switch. The dead silence is making me think what the fuck is wrong with that announcement. There's no Xbox release in sight. It's not for next-gen releases, so no PS5, no Xbox Series S, EX. Despite the game seemingly promising online play for all of the titles supported, there's no crossplay, which is immensely retarded for a game series that has so much hype. But, to quote the big S, you had one job and you done fucked it up. Now that the overall introduction has been put into play, let's talk about some of the actual issues I do have with this collection. And to those who are just gonna say that I'm just being a hater, mind you, I do love these games. Some of the consumer ports are for better or worse, but this is just more or less constructive criticism. You people need to stop assuming and thinking you're in the right when you don't actually want to listen and only listen to the things you think I'm saying. Just gonna throw that out there, especially since the last video I did, which did get some success, by the way. And to those who weren't being complete shitheads, you know who you are, and I thank you. And once again, lead by example. The fact that this is not getting an Xbox release, which is definitely the biggest red flag. This is gonna spark some bullshit console war nonsense, and quite honestly, the console war in the current decade, if it even needs to exist, is fucking retarded, alright? I don't like Gears of War. I find it immensely boring, and I find it immensely overrated because the whole third-person, cover-based shooting, over-the-shoulder camera perspective with X Factor is immensely boring to me. But, considering when the original game came out, it had a lot of success, and for good reason. It's just not my kind of game, but I'm not dumb. A lot of people like the game. And as for Halo, I do like the campaign, but even the original Halo had problems with the game only really having that one mode of play because playing multiplayer with bots is impossible, which I'll digress. And playing the co-op with a friend isn't much drastically different compared to playing the game by yourself, but it's still a nice improvement. But these games have fans for a reason, obviously. And to the whole people saying that Xbox has no games, what about the games that were released even for the original Xbox that weren't necessarily tied to Microsoft, still being only released on original Xbox? Jet Set Radio Future, Katudo Shojin, if I'm even saying that correctly, the Dead or Alive Ultimate games. I know they were technically released on other systems, but they are technically considered the definitive versions of those games. Even Dead or Alive 3. And yes, I know it's gonna say, actually, they were released on arcades and they were released on home systems, don't you know? So, your point about these games being console exclusive, like with Tekken, is completely irrelevant, is ScapeROMFiles. Yeah, I still call bullshit because even if it is technically correct that the games technically were released on arcades first, they didn't get Xbox releases, or GameCube releases, or even PC releases. They're still technically PS2 or whatever exclusive. I certainly don't recall people complaining that some of the best wrestling games of all time were released on PlayStation only, so I don't want to fucking hear it. And also, not to mention that didn't Xbox just lose the Jet Set Radio Future clone as of late? Yeah, it sucks that the studio who made that game got shut down, but next time you say Xbox has no games and you get a sleeper hit published by one of the shittiest developers as of late, keep in mind of what you're actually saying before you say it, because I can't stand that fucking argument. Massive derailment of the console wars put aside, why the fuck are most of these games that are being released are not part of Xbox? They say this is because of something known as MT Framework, which is something to do with the development kit or some shit. I don't quite know about that. I'm not a game developer. I'm a game master. Self-proclaimed anyway. But I can put two and two together that of all the games that Capcom wants to push on us so that we don't have to hate them for a while unless they do something immensely retarded, which they already are, but I'll digress. Them not making this game available on Xbox is honestly absurd. But everything should be on everything, except we're gonna let this slide because of MT Framework. How bullshit of you. Now, speaking of systems, another obvious problem is that the games are not being released on next gen. I'm gonna keep this one short because people really love to go on about how there's no hot new exclusive gaming games, I know, sounds stupid, that are made just for the next gen or whatever. People will legitimately look at something like Elden Ring saying it's not a true next gen experience because it also has versions made for PS4 and Xbox One. And people use this exact same argument for games like Call of Duty Black Ops 6 because it's not a true next-gen video game, where they have to make inferior versions that are also made for the PS4 and Xbox One. And there's my phone call for me bringing up Elden Ring. Listen, I don't care how much of a fucking fanboy you are. I'm not playing Elden Ring. Piss off, you bloody wanker. Fucking idiots. Oh, the camera's on. Oh, shit. Okay, sorry about that. I had to tell off a fucking retard about that shit. Alright. The game being released on PS4 and Xbox while also getting a PS5 and Xbox Series release technically makes Elden Ring not a true next-gen experience. And yes, I know some people are going to say that, oh, well, people have PS5s and Xbox Series X games. That doesn't negate the fact that, I hate to pull a condiment argument for a second, even something like the King of Fighters 2002 UM remaster, which came out not that long ago, that game got the similar treatment. No Xbox release, no next-gen release, pretty much being forced to use the next-gen systems to get the intended compatibility is retarded. It's not a true next-gen experience, and I guess it's good for those who still haven't bought the hot and new systems that people say that there's no game store or whatever, but there's still no Xbox release, and that is immensely dumb. End of story. I did look into some of the features of the game, mainly things like having less flashing options, which I would go on about such tiring aspects, but as much as it annoys me, I can understand there are people who do have seizure problems, and it is nice that there are accessibility settings for those who may not be, well, able to sustain the flashy greatness that is the fighting game series that is Marvel vs. Capcom. So, in that specific instance of accessibility, I am fine with, since it doesn't hamper the game in any less way. I'm personally not going to use it, but instead of the bullshit accessibility something like Insomniac Games uses, I think this is a much more preferable method of accessibility. Just don't shove that bullshit in my face. I want to get the intended experience, just like in the 90s. But it may not be a faithful version of these games, and that is because these games are also going to be based on the arcade versions. Now, I didn't forget about the autists who went on about how Street Fighter Alpha 3 wasn't going to have the Alpha 3 Upper and Alpha Max versions. Now, last I checked, those versions weren't nearly as balanced, even though people complained that Vism was legitimately broken or some shit. Even if the home versions brought a lot of good stuff, as with World Tour and whatever bullshit that they had, and looking back, games like X-Men vs. Street Fighter and Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, they didn't really have much in terms of replay value unless you really like having infinite super meter or infinite super meter for versus mode if you're playing Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. And obviously they're Japanese only, and while they are much more decent compared to the PlayStation versions, getting those versions and emulating them for quite some time was not so easy back then. The PlayStation ports were all shit. Okay, maybe except for Marvel vs. Capcom, since you actually had extra color palettes and being able to use Mega Man's, Magnetic Tempest ability, which I'm actually kind of surprised they did that. They suck for a reason. They turned the 2v2 fighting tag team action into Mortal Kombat 1. The Marvel vs. Capcom Dreamcast version does have major improvements, like having the Cross Fever mode, which is basically the pair play mode, playable Onslaught, much more easier ways of accessing hidden characters, albeit just as convoluted, and quite frankly difficult, since you do have to reach them in the arcade mode. So, if you just want to play the arcade versions, I think you'll be fine. If you want to play the home versions, we're not getting those versions. You can emulate them. They're there for a reason. Well, this war in emulation is honestly absurd. Even though you're buying an emulated collection, you fucking retards! Let's go back to Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter one last time, because I actually do have a point I want to bring up. There is a character in that game who was based on a real-life Japanese comedian who is known as Norimaru. He ain't gonna be in this collection. Fucking deal with it. We do at least get a playable Mech Goki, or Cyber Akuma, which sounds a lot fancier on the tongue, to compensate for it. So, I guess this is acceptable, but I don't know if he'll be allowed in online play. I certainly hope not, because that'll be immensely stupid. I do hope that we do at least get to play as the other bosses in the game, like Onslaught in a specialized arcade mode or some way, or even Abyss in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, my favorite character, who not only was made for the game, but has no full-on render, and of course, no purpose, besides just being a generic final boss with 3 fancy forms. Abyss Supremacy, motherfucker. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is also going to be based on the arcade version, which is strangely interesting because playing the actual arcade version of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was quite the oddball move, since getting it to emulate was quite absurd, and you have the Dreamcast version for a reason. To those arcade purists who never got to play the actual arcade version of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, you might be in for a ride. Unless we're going to get DSP going on about how these versions aren't that great, even though he literally dick sucked Super Turbo on PlayStation. And oh boy, here we go. Player's going to talk about DSP again. Well, yes, you're right, actually, I am. He did man up, but him getting 4th place doesn't mean shit because it's still 4th place. Nationality don't mean shit if you didn't get 1st place, buddy. I'm sorry. 4th place isn't even like bronze material. It's more like participation material. You fucking girl. Stop being a woman about this goddamn replacement, by the way. And yet you have the gall to tell others to let go of things. Amazing. We'll finally get the things that we want. Online netcode, but Capcom better not censor the artwork besides Norimaru, because obviously licensing, whatever, but the last collection that Capcom made, which featured all of the other versions of Darkstalkers, completely pointless by the way, and their other game collections, they did censor one particular artwork of Morgan and Lilith. You can go on about Capcom being all sexualization of Lady D and shit, which is so fucking pointless by the way, but censorship is still censorship. If they're gonna actually censor artwork, whether it be something like Morgan's art in Marvel vs. Capcom, which people have a strange obsession of making Spider-Man and Morgan headcanon, even though it's just a goof and nothing more. I don't think the people who wrote that shit intended to make it go above and beyond the fucking Undertale levels of headcanon purists, but I'm gonna digress on that before I wage another tangent drive on that shit. They better not censor actual artwork that isn't copyrighted to the likes of Norimaru, alright? These games have some of the best artwork, and because of some ninny-prinnies who get mad at Boba, they better not censor artwork of this, dude. If I come to find out that they censored something, even if it's minuscule, I'm not gonna bother with this collection, and I'm being serious, okay? You can play these games on Fightcade for free. You can emulate these games on RetroArch for free. And if you were one of the lucky ones who happened to have the games on Dreamcast, or PlayStation, or Saturn, or whatever, and assuming that the systems work and the disc isn't scratched, you can still play them for free. And there are programs that, besides Fightcade, let you play these games online over the internet for free.
3! It was 3! 3!
Yeah, I'm going in on that Boku no Pico energy, son. It's fucking real. But seriously, just because Capcom is gracing us with a modern-day collection of Marvel vs. Capcom and The Punisher, yeah, I almost forgot to mention they're also throwing in The Punisher, which they're also censoring, by the way, which is completely ironic. And I don't want to hear that, oh, well, it's perfectly understandable. Censorship is still censorship, you dumb fucks. And yes, I know versions outside of JPN removed that shit, but they're still gonna keep the Japanese version censored, so if I want to play The Punisher, I'm gonna fucking emulate it and get the uncensored treat. And whatever bullshit netcode that the game might have on launch is not worth the admission fee when, once again, you could play those games online over the internet, even if you want to deal with the IP bullshit that not even Darks Fidel wants to deal with it, for free. If you want to spend your money on a game that might slow down worse than actual MAME games, you can be my fucking guest. I'm gonna remain optimistic on this one, because I actually want Capcom to do something good for once, because they sure as shit fucked up one too many times, and relying on nostalgia seems to be the goodest way to go, unless they fuck it up somehow, which no doubt they will, but they might not. I don't even know when this collection is coming out. If this collection does end up coming out at some point, they better not fuck it up. And why? Because people like Maximilian, even though I don't really like him, but whatever, they just want to be able to play a good version of the game on modern systems while emulating it, which is understandable. But, do you want a decent version of a game that you can play online? Or do you want a shitty version that just makes you think, wow, I could just play the emulator version I've played for years? You can be the judge in that one. Now, if you excuse me, I gotta go talk to a Mrs. Wong. For racial bullshit purposes, and for ruining Mega Man X5's English names. A rose by any other name, huh? Well, your Guns N' Roses tyranny ends now. Oh, hey, it's Ada Wong. Ada, wait!